Hello, and welcome to a Season 1 episode of Beyond Teaching, a new series featured on the PsychSessions network. This series is hosted by Susan Nolan from Seton Hall University, Adelinka Akinseler-Smith from City College of New York, City University of New York, Asani Sewell from Pacific University, and yours truly, Eric Landrum from Boise State University. Through informal discussions and email exchanges, what we discovered and agreed upon is that to be a successful academic or professional, it takes more than teaching, research, or clinical skills. That is, today's psychology professionals were not taught everything they need to know in graduate school. How do you find a mentor in your career path? And what do you do if that mentoring relationship turns sour? What are the strategies for dealing with Zoom fatigue, both for you and your students? How do you learn to say no, whether that is for a job offer, a student's letter of recommendation request, or a potential committee assignment? How do you choose what journal to submit your work to, and how do you deal with cranky reviewers? These topics and more are discussed in the Season 1 episodes that are now being released spring and summer of 2021. In future seasons, we'll be inviting guest experts to join us, and we have a host of topics to discuss regarding areas of our jobs that no one ever prepared us for. Now, I don't mean that to sound cranky or anything, but there really is a lot that no one ever told us, right? And so that's what this podcast is all about, taking us beyond teaching. Welcome back for another episode of Beyond Teaching. I'm Eric Landrum along with
Yinka Akinseler-Smith.
And I'm Susan Nolan.
And if I am reading all of my notes properly, no, I'm not reading any notes. Today, we're going to chat with you about how to think about selecting opportunities to get involved with organizations on a regional, national, international level outside of your institution or outside of your local community. Colleagues, do I have that one correct?
Absolutely. And this is building on our previous podcast episode where we talked about how to choose and get involved with committees at your institution. And when we were planning for these two topics, we actually had a debate about whether or not they were similar or different. And I was the one arguing for different, because I see that the internal committees are so much more directly related to getting promotion of some kind at your institution and figuring out how you fit in there, where I find the professional organizations are much more about my identity as a scholar and as a person in the field at large. And they do so much more. I feel like the committees on my campus, I'm doing a lot for the university, whereas I feel like the professional organizations and networks from them are doing so much for me. So when I'm choosing how to be involved in the wider world outside my campus, I'm thinking about more, what can this do for me? Obviously, don't get me wrong, I want to give to those organizations, and I do, but that's the thinking that goes into it for me. But go ahead and argue with me, Eric and Yinka.
Well, I don't think it's arguing per se. I think it's just respectfully disagreeing, or maybe it's a yes and. So it's obviously developing my identity as a professional psychologist. But I will tell you that my participation in organizations like Psychi and organizations like the Society for the Teaching of Psychology directly contributed to my ability to earn not only promotion with tenure, but promotion to full professor. There is a codicil at Boise State University in the promotion to full professor that says that you must demonstrate that you have achieved recognition at the national or international level. And I was able to demonstrate because of my participation in STP and Psychi, where I had done that. And Susan, I don't disagree with what you said, but I also think there's the added direct benefit to my career and my advancement at Boise State because of my participation in those organizations.
I will give you the yes and, because that is also
I was going to say, I think
we
it's
have
both
a similar
and.
codicil.
Yeah, I think it's across the board. I would also agree that it's a both and.
I guess I would argue, though, that you're not choosing it because I think you're much more strategic at the committee level within your university about which committee and what levels and how visible you are. Whereas I think whatever professional organization you get involved in is going to do that for you. So it's more about choosing the home within the professional world. You did that with Society for the Teaching of Psychology and with Psychi, Eric, but you could just as easily have done it with Psychonomics or with Division 52, or there's a lot of different ways. And how did you choose those?
I'm not so sure you can do it with any organization. I think you can do it with any organization which you have the opportunity to advance to leadership. Because I'm not so sure that being a member of STP or just a member of Psychi or a member of Division 52, the international division of APA, just being a member, I'm not so sure that would have qualified me for my institutional.
No, but I'm saying you could have become a leader in a number of different organizations by working your way up.
Thank you. There's a compliment in there, and I'm going to thank you. That's very sweet of you to say that. But just being a member alone of any of those, I don't think would have. So being involved from a wee age and being committed over time and having the good fortune of those, and being privileged and having the good fortune of those organizations allowing me to be a chair of something, to lead something, to organize a symposium, to becoming a vice president in Psychi, to becoming a task force leader in STP and all that stuff over literally decades. That's how I got to be able to do the international and national contributions that allowed me to have the promotion and tenure benefits.
So I want to go back though, Eric, to that moment when you became that baby member of that organization. I would like to argue that most people, if they put in the time with a single organization over the decades, can rise through the leadership ranks. If you're willing to put in the work, I think you have reached, not everybody can become the level that you have, Eric, with multiple presidencies. But I would say almost anyone who wants to can rise up to an important leadership position in most organizations if they put in the time.
I think they can have a leadership position like chair a committee, but I think of something like Psychonomics, or I think of something like APS. There's only so many leadership positions in the Association for Psychological Science. There's only.
I disagree. I think there's lots of committees, and like you say, become a committee chair. Not everyone can become president. There aren't enough.
But there's not a lot of committees in the APS structure.
But then I don't think everyone rises. Again, going back to that, has the skills, is able to. So what is it that those of us, for example, like me, who I've not been in that type of leadership position, how do we get by? How do we get? I think it's about being involved, being connected, engaging other people.
But you have been in leadership positions, Yinka, outside of CUNY. You've been on boards and you've founded nonprofits.
Okay, fine.
Find your niche. Like, how do you start by putting yourself in a position where you found a home and you maybe can start working your way up to leadership?
I think the wording there is interesting. I think some people find their niche and they develop it over time by investing in one organization. But I think you just identified it with Yinka. Some people invent their niche.
Right.
So maybe they're not part of an organization for 20 years like I was. Maybe they're the founder of their own thing.
And I would add, sometimes it's nice what's going on in the world, and an opportunity comes along and you jump on it. Because I'm thinking of like the organization you're talking about, Now We Own. There was a war going on. We came together. We decided we needed to do something. And then it grew from there. And one thing led to another. So sometimes I guess it's opportunities present themselves, and you may not necessarily have a plot or a plan that this is where I want to be 20 years from now. Right. But one thing leads to another. And again, the networking and the relationship building and the connecting. And so people get to know you, get to know of your work. And that takes you places that you may not have ever imagined. I'll say that for myself.
And think about the impact of two individuals that I know that volunteered at the UN. That's instant international impact. And as little as you're about to say about anybody can volunteer there. No, not anybody can. I was never invited.
Anyone who lives within 50 miles of New York City.
Okay, I guarantee not anyone who lives within 50 miles of New York City is invited to volunteer at the UN. But the two of you who have done that together, that has international impact.
If you live within 50 miles of New York City, you can email me at Seton Hall and I will introduce you to people on some of the non-governmental organizations that have consultative status with the United Nations. And if you really want to, and this is your area of interest, email me and I'll connect you with folks.
What you're saying actually, Susan, goes back to something that I have said to students when they've met with me to talk about interest or expressed interest is, yes, you can be shy, but what have you got to lose? Send an email, cold call, reach out. And most times, at least for me, I will respond. So it's making that bit of an effort to reach out that will help move people along as well.
I also recommend some of the APA divisions as a way to start to get your feet wet. Many of them you can belong to without belonging to APA. And so it's a lot less expensive. For example, the Society for the Teaching of Psychology Division 2 of APA, it costs $25 American a year to belong. And I belonged to several divisions and went to some of their conferences and started to get a sense and had some leadership positions in other places, but really started feeling like my home was the Society for the Teaching of Psychology and started putting more of my energies there. So like Yinka said, I didn't have a 20-year plan. Mm-hmm. It's just what felt right. And because I love teaching and I love the evidence-based focus that STP has, and then was lucky enough to meet Eric and say, Eric, how can I get involved, and have Eric guide me, which again gets to what Yinka said, reach out to people and ask, I want to be more involved. And by the way, if you do want to get more involved with STP, go to teachpsych.org and click the Get Involved button. There's always things on that Get Involved button.
Yinka, now I know you do a lot of training with people who are becoming clinical psychologists. That's correct.
Or counseling psychologists.
Clinical or counseling. And do you have your own practice as well?
Through the program for survivors of torture, I see patients there and I do evaluations.
So what's the important networking for folks on your side of psychology? What's the important national, international networking? The academics know their side of the tracks mm-hmm. pretty well. What's important on your side of the world?
So it's getting experience, it's reaching out, getting some volunteer experience. For example, the program for survivors of torture, we have, on the academic side, the interns and the externs that come through, but you're interested in working with forced migrants. There are a number of organizations, again, New York City, great place to be for this, that work with this population. And it may not necessarily be that you're at the level to do clinical interventions, but being there, language services, English language service, interpreting, translating, just meeting people, being there. There's so many ways of getting involved in so many small ways that people don't always think of getting involved, and then growing from there. And then people get to know you. Oh, you came, you volunteered for a semester, a year, a summer, and you're interested in learning more and coming back. You go to the presentations, the talks, you familiarize yourself with the population. These are some of the ways of engaging.
And I think what you're pointing out, Yinka, is really important about showing up at conferences when the pandemic allows it again. When you go to an organization's conference, that's when you really get a sense of, is this, the place for me? Am I interested in the talks? Are the people talking my language? Mm-hmm. And also there's socializing. A lot of conferences will have social events. Some conferences actually will have dinner signups. So you can sign up in groups of 10 or 12 to go out to dinner with random people from the conference. There are lots and lots of ways where you can socialize. And that's where the magic happens, as you're saying, Yinka.
What advice would we give? I'm trying to bring us in the home stretch. I think it's easier sometimes to think about what we do on our campus as part of our job. But what advice can we come to some concrete recommendations about as we're thinking about getting involved outside of our campus, outside of our community? Are there 2 or 3 recommendations that we can distill for our listeners?
I always have said to students in the past, you have access to the internet. Google, find, get a few organizations, and I'll give them a few names. Look and see what they're doing. If there's faculty who does this kind of work, look them up. And again, send a brief email. People, it's so easy to flatter people. I've read about you. I've seen you talk. I want to find out more. Can we talk? If you're far away, not in the geographic location, well, can I call you? Can we Zoom now? Or can I come by your office? Is there a time? And I think it's really easy. At least, and those who have followed through have said, oh yeah, I was surprised. We are accessible. We're not hidden behind closed doors. At least I don't think so.
It's interesting because before you said that, Yinka, I was going down a similar road about my advice being for people newer in the field. I would say start early. I didn't really know about professional organizations. I wished I had started sooner. So when you're a new faculty member, join a couple of organizations, get involved in a committee in a small way so you're not using up all your time. Get involved at the graduate student level. Many of these organizations have student arms that cost even a lot less money. Get involved early and ask your advisors if you're in graduate school. If you're going to a conference, for example, ask your advisor if they'll introduce you to some people. Ask if the advisor's not going, ask your advisor, do you know anyone who's there? I've actually had some of my master's students go to a conference and I've connected them with alums from the program and then they end up becoming friends. So ask your advisors to make these connections for you.
I think the two things that I would say, and you may or may not agree with these, and that's okay. Introverts have to start to break out of their shell. A lot of academics are introverts and they love the quiet life of living in their head. And networking requires some level of extroversion, communicating with others, going to conferences, chatting with people in the hallways, going out to dinners and sitting next to someone you don't know and having a conversation, who sometimes people can become your best friends, or that can be a unpleasant experience for 2.5 hours because academics like to have long dinners. And I think introverts need to get out of their shells. And secondly, what you did your research in graduate school does not have to be the rest of your life. No, if you enjoyed it and you loved it and that's what you want to pursue, good for you. That is amazing. But unless you have locked into some sort of weird contract where that's what your startup money is, divined into, and you don't have any control over it, you can change course. A lot of people who study teaching and learning in psychology weren't trained in the teaching and learning of psychology. They have basic doctoral skills. That was the big old Swiss Army knife that allows them to switch into something else. And so study something that brings you pleasure and that will help you get promoted with tenure and make a difference.
And Eric, just to finally add on to that, and if you want to make that shift, professional organizations are the place to help you make that shift, meeting people in the place you want to go toward. So we started off by disagreeing somewhat, but I think we've ended by being relatively in agreement.
Yeah, we were going to disagree in the end. We do.
Thank you.
Anything else to add? I want to give you the last word.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you all, as usual.